And so that show like really helped me propel myself as far as like wanting to be a full-time artist. And of course there's ups and downs, but like I wouldn't change it for anything, you know? Like
Well,
it's
I always say it's like turning a light switch on
yeah,
and you try to turn it off and that light just doesn't go off.
not at all. It
I'm ruined. I'm marred for life.
yeah.
Bebop, artist, bebop, artist, bebop, bebop.
All right, so being an artist, we have the most diverse conversations, and that's why I started a podcast about artists conversing. It's been over a decade. I can't tell you what Jonathan Paul Jackson and I talked about back in the day when I knew him through Bet's Gallery in Houston, but I remembered enjoying the conversations. And on social media, I'm always soaking in the work of others, and I love what he's producing. And I do remember the work from back then, so I'm eager to pick his brain and see how he's doing and evolving and thriving. How are you doing, sir?
I'm I'm good. I'm great. Yeah. Excited to be here. Excited to
Cool.
have another conversation. It's been too long.
It has. Well, like I said, I can't tell you what we were talking about really, but I remember just really digging what you were into, and part of that was your artwork. It's always funny when do you love the question when people ask what kind of art do you do?
Yeah, I definitely love that answer. I love that question for sure. Just because it's like I get to answer everything, and then that just jumps into the conversation of everything I do. You know,
Right.
so it's exciting. Yeah, I guess I'm a type of artist that likes getting asked that question, just
Okay.
because I kind of like I like to be able to answer. Yeah, I do everything, and then we get to have these like conversations about all the different mediums I work in, or curating a show, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, I get asked that, and I love that we have phones. This, this is what I do, but but no, what you do, you hover in kind of the abstract-ish realm, I think.
Yes, yeah. I guess like the more whenever I like actually started studying art, like I guess right, I've been making art for a long time. But then there came this moment in me wanting to make art where it's like, all right, like can I leave a lasting impression in art history, you know? Because at the end of the day, like that's kind of like what artists want to do, you know, like they want to be seen within the realm of art history, whether it be 5 minutes or an hour or years or whatever it might be, you know? And so I kind of had to like rethink what type of art I was making and like why I was making it and like what type of art like really I like really enjoyed. Um, and so like as I started studying artists, like there aren't too many like African American abstract artists that like have a moment in art history. You know, they're sprinkled and here and there. And so I started studying those artists, and then come to find out like a lot of these there's like so many artists from like the 1920s to 40s that were African American that were making work that I was just like, oh my, you know, I was just like it looked like it was from the future. It looked like it could have been made 5 years ago, you know? And so to know that like African American artists were making that work like that far back, you know, and during these like terrible times to be black in America, like they still were able to like conjure up whatever you want to call it, energy, bravery, whatever it is, like they were able to find this spirit and like put it onto canvas. And that just like super inspired me to like really start trying to figure out like my voice and like what it means to be like, you know, what kind of narrative am I going to add to the African American, you know, art world in that sense of like what my story is. And so I started working for other artists as well. Like I didn't go to art school. I just started like becoming like I like worked in and out of galleries. Like that's how I met you. And so I like learned the gallery ropes. And then I started working for artists in their studios, right? Like learning how to paint with them and like mix colors and all that type of stuff. And so that's how I learned like really how to make art. And then talking with them about their African American narrative and like how they came up with it and like what they wanted to talk about within that realm of making art and being African American. And so eventually, after I stopped working for artists, I started going to like the art museums a lot and just was fascinated by African sculpture. And I was like, that's it. Like, I'm going to do some like man rave, like, you know, like I really wanted to, like, because brought like, he brought emphasis on the importance of African sculpture in this like great way. And so did Picasso. And so I was like, man, that's what I'm going to talk about. Like, I'm going to talk about how, how important like African sculpture is to me by like painting it abstractly. Because what would happen was like, I would go to the art museum with my friends and like be left alone in like the artifact wing, you know, because like that's where I like, and they would want to go to see Warhols and etc. And I love Warhol and I love all the masters and all that type of stuff, but for some reason, you know, like sculpture, like indigenous sculpture, just like I don't know, I find it fascinating, like everything about it, in the sense of like these people that didn't have art galleries, they had no reason to make this art except for pure expression, and here they made all these artifacts. Like museums are, you know, just there's so many artifacts around the world, and it's just so awesome that we're able to find like these old realms of the old world, and they're just so beautiful. So I would get sucked in, and so I knew like that was what I wanted to, that was going to be like my African American voice, right? Because whenever I saw African American contemporary African American painters, it's like, you know, they do black portraits and, you know, all these things. And so I was like, oh, like this is it. Like this is how I'm going to stand apart from all of them. I'm not going to talk about hip hop. I'm not going to talk about, you know, paint black people. I'm going to talk about like what inspired all these black artists from the get-go, you know, which was African sculpture, right? Because like African sculpture, you know, has this, or indigenous sculpture really has this lineage to like modern art and contemporary painting. And so I wanted to like celebrate what inspired contemporary painting and modern art from the get-go. And so whenever I first started the series, which was me like printing out indigenous work, like indigenous sculptures, and then painting over them in like an abstract way, but I wouldn't like deface them, so to speak. I would paint like abstract things around them to like bring emphasis like to what they made me feel, right? Because I'm an abstract expressionist.
But it's
So
like a visual conversation.
correct, right, correct. Yeah, like it's me talking to the sculpture, correct,
Yeah.
right? And then, you know, I submitted that to an art center, and they called me a cultural appropriator. Now, whether or not, like, and I did like different indigenous sculptures too. It just wasn't African American. It wasn't just African sculpture, right? So maybe they were calling me a cultural appropriator because of that, you know. And so like that made me like revamp the whole thing. So I like, after I got that rejection letter, I went back to the proposal itself, and I like just pretty much just took it apart. Like, how can they, you know, in the sense of like, what wording was I using to make them feel that, you know? And then like, and as far as the imagery goes, like, what can I do to make them not feel that? And so my mentor was like, just focus on African sculpture, you know, like, we know you love indigenous sculpture, but like, that's, you know, like, that's just the piece, you know, like the politics of like art centers and stuff like that. It's like kind of hard whenever you're not from that indigenous people to like use that work, you know, regardless of the color of the skin. And so I just started focusing on African sculpture, and instead of like, I would call them like Untitled African Sculpture number 24. And so what I did was to combat like the idea of I made this sculpture, because I think that's what people probably thought, you know. What I did was I put the tribe's name and like the region of Africa that they came from and what year they were prominent in Africa. So you could Google that, like, so you Google the title and then you get to see that sculpture on your phone. And so you get to like see that correlation and see where it comes from. Then you get to know about the people. And it's kind of like, that was probably a game changer doing that to my titles, because it like opened up, like I have people that go to my shows and they email me after they go to the shows and they Google and they're like, I'm finding all these crazy, I never knew that Africa had all these like really crazy tribes and, the gold kingdoms and all this other stuff. And it's exciting that it's kind of working, right? Like I want people to be just as excited about the African sculptures as I am. And so it's cool to like get that feedback from them, because they're like super pumped about learning something new that, I was able to like be a part of.
That's interesting. I have a similar connection to Mayan art.
Yeah.
Now I grew up with, they were touristy things, but things in my home from
Yeah.
my dad's country of origin is Guatemala. And so I grew, I became an artist, and all of a sudden these works were coming out. And it really wasn't until recently when my mom brought over this thing that used to hang on our wall that I realized where these tribal looking paintings were coming from. And it is exciting to, I guess I have an aversion to looking at the hieroglyphs too much, because although they have seeped into my consciousness, I still want to do my own thing with them. And I think part of that was I remember I'm really connecting with how you're describing your journey with indigenous artifacts, because I think it was North Carolina. I was in a museum, and the basement was nothing but religious art from all over the world. And it felt like everyone was represented except the place I came from. And so to me, it became, it started with the photography project. I think that's when I was at Betts Gallery, was doing those photographs. They were Mayan inspired. And those were from the creation accounts, and I would read stuff, but I didn't want to look at the hieroglyphs, but some of that architecture was in those photographs, and that's what I was using to build those. And then, those eventually turned into paintings, but it's, I think it's inevitable for most people to dig into their culture when they're creating. And I think part of the connection to indigenous work is when you were talking about African Americans making abstract art back then, it's not so much about making time. I think for artists, making stuff for us is like breathing. I mean, do you agree? Or
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, like I don't feel right if I don't make things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bummer day whenever I can't make a painting.
Yes, totally. And I try not to let that happen. I at least make a drawing or two before going to bed. But so let's backpedal a little bit. How early did you get into art?
Oh man, I can't. I get asked this question so much. I've been doing a lot of interviews lately, and it's just like, I think the youngest recollection, and it's something that I like ask myself a lot. It's like the earliest time I can think of like getting like praise for art or being like, oh man, this is so great. I think I was like 10. And then like after that, I just love that encouragement so much. Like my mom being like, oh, this is, it was like, it was, the cube house with the cube chimney with the smoke, like whatever 10-year-olds draw, but like getting that like recognition from someone I wanted attention from, and it like drawing that came easy, right? And so, but yeah, probably like 10. And then, I had my first like really like big recognition show. I was like 20, and I got a show at Cafe Brazil, and it ran for like 9 months. And I remember like a week in, like Dan was called me and he was like, dude, there's like MFH board members having lunch here, like really interested in the work. And I was like, it just, yeah, that was like,
Yeah.
you know, again, to go back to the encouragement thing, like that just kind of like propelled me forward.
Yeah, I think for most people, it's a time in their youth. You know, you were
Yeah.
talking about building or drawing the house. For me, it was turtles, neon turtles, like very bright.
Yeah.
I had the
Yeah.
brightest color ring box in my class, and I would just get lost making these things. And it was cool. My first grade teacher said to my mom, she called me over. I thought I was in trouble. And she shows my mom the drawings, and I'm thinking, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
And she says, I won't die without seeing your son's work in a gallery or museum.
That's great.
I was 6, and yeah, that stuck with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
You know, I didn't.
impactful.
Yeah, that's
It my you know my late mentor Richard Stout, he's a abstract expressionist painter from Houston, Beaumont originally, moved to Houston, went to Chicago Art Institute for um, painting, graduated, moved to Vienna. You know, like he lived a life, right? Like he just
Yeah.
died at the age of 85. 85. He died in April. Um, and he was like, you know, like we would talk about moments like that, right? And then I would have a good show and just be so excited about the show. And he's like, put that moment in your back pocket, you know, because like there's gonna be times whenever you'll need those moments to like really, you know, like it's like self reassurance, you know, like we as artists, like we go through these moments where it's just like it's not like should I be making this or like it's like should I be heading down this road or whatever. And so like those little moments of people that just encourage us to make art, like those moments are good to keep in your back pocket. And as you did, you know, you've kept it since you were 6, you know, so
Yeah.
you know, like that moment and like it's important to like kind of recognize those moments or to go back and think about those moments or try to, you know, like dig deep in your psyche and your life and figure out whenever like the first moment you got recognition for your work is, and like that's important because it usually leads and opens up to other memories, and it's pretty great.
Do you find that with age, that need gets to be less?
Um, yes, yes, because like you reprioritize what like is important in that sense. You know, like I remember whenever I was young, like it's like man, success is like having a great show and selling like 10 paintings and being able to sell like each painting for like $2,000 or more or whatever. And then you do that and you're like, I guess, you know, like it just that that becomes so much less part of it. And then I get to meet like mentors, like my mentor that just passed, that make you really understand that like success is like being able to paint a painting that it comes from your imagination, and it's like 100% from like your imagination to the canvas, and it's like the perfect painting, you know, so to speak. Like if you can translate what's going on in your brain to a canvas and you like agree with it 100%, like he's like that's success. And so you kind of like redefine and like reprioritize what that kind of is. And so the need for, I guess, that recognition kind of goes away because the recognition is in the work, right? At that point.
Right. Well, I think that idea of success varies.
Yeah.
You know, I think we all think about all of these questions, and success has been one of them to me. And I mean, I draw from everything, and music is heavy for me,
Mm-hmm.
and all spectrums of music. But there's the band Fugazi.
Yeah,
The,
absolutely.
Okay, so have you
Yeah.
heard him speak? So
I've heard like a few of his kind of talks.
okay, so Ian Mackay, he's at one of those things where he's at a college and he's just like, ask me questions.
Yeah.
And so they ask him about success, and he says, well, success is that the four of us got into a room and we recorded that thing.
Right.
What happened, who listened to it, if it sold, if it didn't sell, if people hated it, it didn't matter. And I think I've always known that, but like hearing things like that to, so I think especially creatives obsess over like, this has got to be perfect, but things only get perfect if you keep doing them. And to me, it's just output and constant movement. And, maybe this one wasn't as perfect as this one, but it doesn't matter because I'm 5 pieces ahead now.
Right.
That to me is success, is keeping that flow going until you're out of here. So
Absolutely. I think, and I think you're just like, and that, because like that's like I guess like at the beginning, like that's like, because again, like that's what you think success is, right? Is like selling this work and et cetera, et cetera.
yeah.
And of course, like that kind of maintain, like I guess like also success, I could define it as like I'm able to live like a moderate lifestyle and to continue to be a painter. Like I can do what I want. I not necessarily do what I want, but like as long as I crank out and like finish these 10 paintings a month or whatever it is, like I can continue to be this, I can continue to live happy and stuff like that. So that's kind of like success, but that kind of comes after you start making this work that just kind of like flows out of you. Because at the end, like that's the work people want. And it's like raw and honest and like yourself. Because I like whenever I try to make works based off of my honest or raw works, quote unquote, like I can't do it. And like people see it, they're like, I don't know, like I see what you're trying to do in this painting, but it's not as honest as this painting. And I don't know like which one is raw and which one I try to copy. So that's a pretty great feeling to be able to make something. Again, make something that's like 100% your imagination, and people are into it. Like you make a connection with someone, like that's great.
So,
Excuse me.
So you've said that concept a few times, making completely from your imagination. How do you feel about pop art?
Man, so like I love art so much, and I love pop art. I love like it was a counter to abstract expressionism, like that's why Andy Warhol and like all those guys, because like they weren't these brutal artists that like Pollock was, or like they didn't have like these like harsh tones like all these abstract expressionist words, right? Like they were so like they took up the whole canvas, and it was like I'm this brooding man that's so tough and I drink whiskey and et cetera, et cetera. And Andy Warhol wasn't that. And Jasper Johns wasn't that. And Rauschenberg weren't that. But they still wanted to say something, And they said it perfectly. Like they came at a time in America whenever like that needed to be talked about. And it's great. I like love it. I like really love, I love like what the response was. Like their response to like abstract expressionism was pop art. And what a great response. Like you can't get a better response than that. And it changed the world. It like absolutely changed the world. Like there were no paintings like, soup cans. Like that blows my mind. Like it's just beautiful that we were at a point in art where like that became acceptable. And that again that changed and moved art forward so many steps. How can I hate it?
Well, I mean, it was when I was living in Houston. I've always loved pop art.
Mm.
I love all spectrums of art, but I used to make it really small because I was influenced by dialogue around me and other artists, and pop art bad. You shouldn't touch that because then you're not a real artist. And so what happened? I don't know if you're conscious of this, but I don't live in Houston anymore. But I live in North Texas. I got relocated here. I didn't know a single soul.
Wow.
I landed in Fort Worth, and And so I was like, man, I need to sell some art because that's what I do. That's my
Yeah.
full-time thing.
Yeah.
So I set up in front of a bar parking lot that was down the road from the museum. And I put up my stuff, you know, my large pieces, which were, you know, as you say, from the imagination, what I had to say. And, you know, I just sat there most of the day. I sold like a piece, I think. And then I realized this was a bad situation.
Yeah.
So the next week, I had been wanting to do these record covers, taking record covers that I grew up with. Like I said, music, very
Important.
instrumental to.
Yeah.
I always have it in the studio. It probably drew me into photography, looking at album covers. So I remade a few. I put them up, and then cars started stopping. And I felt weird about it, but throughout the day, people were so excited about this, and it created another dialogue that I really had not had in art. People were always asking me questions. They were interested, but I liked the idea, and it's what Warhol, you know, tapped into. Everybody knows the Campbell soup can.
Absolutely.
Now in pop art, not everybody knows, because I tend to pick it like the B side of things, like the guy who got hit in the background by a car in this movie that was in there for 5 seconds. But one other person, and it might be a rarity, will remember that guy. And then there's this weird connection. And
Right.
That to me is as pop art moves forward, it's just funny to think about. So, but that's my diatribe on pop art. But but I wanted to go back because if you don't mind me asking about your day to day, because I think that's interesting in these conversations. Like I said, I'm full time. It sounds like you're full time at this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, full time, man. It's like my day starts at like 6 a.m. Get up. I try to like like be active in the morning. Like I have like a big backyard and it's like a nice garden, so I'll go in the garden in the morning and like try to move around first and then go get some coffee in me and then come back and do like a warm up painting or something small just to like kind of get me quote unquote loose, like warmed up, you know, stretched, and then I'll start working. I have a lot of paintings in progress, you know, so I'll start working on those after I do the warm up. I don't know why I like doing warm ups before I started painting. I've already been starting. I don't know. I guess it's like a new day, and it's like it helps a lot for some reason. So, and then I'll just kind of work on stuff throughout the day until about 12 is like whenever a lot of my meetings start. And so if I have like a lot of meetings in a day, then like from 12 until 4, I'll be in meetings, and then I'll come back here and start to work again.
So what are the meetings?
Sometimes they're new projects. I'm represented by a gallery here in Houston, Foltz Gallery, Foltz Fine Art off of Westheimer.
Okay.
And so once they started, me and the gallery started working together, we kind of like have meetings every once in a while because I post a lot of work on Instagram. And so they'll be like, oh man, bring this painting in, and you know, we'll talk about it, and I'll bring it in, and you know, and they'll try to sell it, or we'll talk about possible shows coming up, or you know, they're always getting me involved in like interior designers and stuff like that, like involved in doing projects for them. So so you know, it's just like and then I meet with other artists. Like from 12 to 4 is like usually whenever I schedule like that kind of time. Like if someone wants to get coffee, I'm like, oh, we can go between, you know, if I have a meeting between, you know, at 1, then we can go after 1. And so, and then that time I get to come back and I don't have to communicate with anybody anymore. And I get to kind of focus on painting, you know. I have roommates, but I love talking to them. I talk to them every day, so it doesn't matter. But as far as like people outside of the house, it helps whenever I can just get all those conversations out of the way, so I can come back to work.
How long have you been full time?
Um, see, I'm 30. 4 years, like real full time. Like most of my money comes from me making art. Yeah, probably like 32. Like about 31. I like started to like move into that realm of like I was working for artists and I was getting paid from them, but I soon like knew what I wanted to talk about, right? And so I kind of like wanted to work on my own. And then I started making a lot of work. And then my work, like I started making so much work that I was like, all right, well, I gotta stop working for you because I don't have time to make my own work and I'm being asked to be in shows now and so it just kind of like all came together. And then I had a show, I was in a group show at Deborah Colton Gallery here in Houston. And that show changed my life. Like as far as like sales go, as far as being connected to people, as far as like um, self affirmation, right? Like I never thought I could be this artist that could sell a painting for $2,000 or sell multiple paintings for $2,000. And that gallery or that show kind of proved to myself and to my family, thank God, that I could do that. And like, of course, like, we all want to do things for ourselves, but whenever you have people that you love, like really accept what you do, again, like that type of encouragement, just like, and I'm so lucky to be able to have that. So yeah, like after that show, I was probably like, and I was like 31 or 32 whenever I was in that group show. And after that, like I just started really pumping out work. Just like I knew whatever, I knew I could make work that people liked because it was proven. It was a proven fact. And so that show like really helped me propel myself as far as like wanting to be a full-time artist. And of course there's ups and downs, but like I wouldn't change it for anything, like
Well,
it's
I always say it's like turning a light switch on
yeah,
and you try to turn it off and that light just doesn't go off.
not at all. It
I'm ruined. I'm marred for life.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
For me, it was
Absolutely.
very much like that, and there have been trade-offs. It has
Yeah.
affected the way I have relationships.
Oh,
You know,
100%.
um,
Any type of relationship. Yeah.
yeah, well,
Friendship.
especially romantic. I'm terrible at
I'm the
them
worst.
because
I'm so bad at romantic
um,
relationships.
I somehow managed to make a gaggle of children still, and then there's that balance,
Yeah, right.
because yeah, I have toddlers, and I'm listening to your routine. And it's a lot like mine was before children. I mean, I would get up, I would just work 20 hours, and
Yeah.
then fall back asleep and do it again.
Yeah.
And
Exactly. Pretty much.
I would market. I would have days where I did certain stuff. Now it's different. Because I'm a single father. I'm watching all these kids. I do my marketing during the day. I've learned how to sell online a lot.
Okay. Awesome.
When I go to sleep, I create projects for myself like podcasts. I, I start to make things and then repeat. And like you said, I don't even see them as ups and downs. They're just different periods in your
Correct.
bizarre life that you chose for yourself. You did this
Right.
to yourself, Jonathan.
Yeah, 100%. I definitely did. I'll agree with that for sure. Because there's not, I mean, yeah, there's times where I don't think there's ever been a time after I kind of quote unquote took that leap that I kind of said I shouldn't be an artist. Like it's just I don't know, like once I like started letting it really like flow out of me, like that's whenever good stuff started happening. In the sense of like me making work, Like I lived so like on this journey of being this like real artist, right? Like this idea of man, all the artists that like I would read all these books, biographies on artists, and like all they talked about were like living in their studios. In the beginning, Picasso lived in his studio, like Monet lived in his, all these great masters, like Warhol even lived in his studio for a little bit, etc. And so that was something that I was like, man, if they're all doing it, like that's something that needs to be done for me if I want to be like this real artist, you know? And so um, at the time, I was living on my mom's couch, and then my friend opened up this art gallery in downtown Houston, and I helped him curate a couple shows, and I was in a couple shows, and so there was like a loft space upstairs, and I was like, man, can I just like start living in the loft space? I was like living on my mom's couch, and he's like, yeah, dude, of course. So I started living in this loft space of this gallery, which was awesome because it was like right on Main, right by like West Alabama and Main Street. So like
Yeah.
there was like all these bars and stuff, you know, and like I would stay open until like 2 a.m. because people would come and buy art at 2, you know, like drunk people and like loved it, right? Because like there's never been an art gallery that stayed open that late, and we were selling like really good work, you know. And so we would stay open until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, whatever, you know, because like people would come in and want to buy work and or just be excited to see something new. And we were doing really well. And then they asked us to move out. And so I was like, well, I don't want to go back. You know, I was like really worried because I didn't want to go back to moving in with my mom. But Juan Alonso, the guy who owned the gallery, was like, yo, man, like you can come live, you know, come get a studio at El Rincon Social, which is this warehouse space over on the east side of Houston. And there's probably like 12 studios over there. And it's all artists, like 5 of us lived, worked there, and the rest kind of, you know, the rest just had studios there. But for 3 years, I lived and worked in a 500 square foot space, and like I slept on a couch. I slept on like an IKEA couch, and like that's like that was important for me to do because all the greats did it, and I could also
That's,
like be so next to my work, you know, like if I got an idea, wake up in the middle of the night, work on it, go back to sleep. And like that, I think that was important because it, like if you have a studio and you drive from your apartment to your studio, there's all this static that like comes into your brain as you're driving. And so the idea becomes less 100%. You finally get to your studio, it's like 75% of what you had, you know? And so like, I like took that out of the equation, you know, like I live where I work. And so therefore, like I was able to like just make work all the time, just constantly making work.
well, it's the best to live
Yeah, I loved it.
in your
Like
creative area.
I
You know, it's
loved it.
funny because I have my studio space out back, but as the children grow older, it's starting to creep back in here. And when they're old enough, this is just going to be a studio.
Yeah. That's awesome.
I'm sorry, you know, I'm sorry, kids, but
Yeah. And that's awesome because that'll probably just like, you know, that'll create a dialogue with y'all's, you know, you and your kids' relationship.
I
You
was
know?
going to ask you about that. You know, as you know, you're younger than me, obviously, but it's interesting to hear your journey. Like I'm reflecting back on mine,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm at the stage where it's starting to affect the little eyes looking up at me. I see it in my kids, but I also here at where I live, it's Bedford, Texas. Across the street is Hearst, and
Okay.
I'm the director of development for a 501c called Central Arts.
Awesome.
And part of what I helped create was a summer camp. You know, all that's on hiatus right now as we try to
Yeah.
get ourselves collected. But you know, it's $6 a day classes for kids. Not classes; they just have studio time.
That's
So it's
great.
2,800 square feet that we got from the city, and they just get to go in there. And some of the parents will be confused until their kids go in there and love it. Because
Yeah.
I thought about, as far as instruction, I'm like, I don't want to sit there and teach people to draw a butterfly.
Right.
And if I'm walking around and they ask me, and it,
Yeah, that's different.
yeah, it's pretty cool. You know, we would draw it on the walls in there. And are you feeling any of that as you get older?
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think, and I felt that at a young age as well. I I had some friends that were collectors, and they had some kids that like loved my work, right? And just like really, I didn't know they like really liked the work. I would go over to their house and eat dinner and like, and like see the kids knew me and etc. And I was like, I mean, I'm 36 now. I was like 33 at the time, which wasn't too long ago. Anyways, uh, and so it turns out they like really loved the work, right? And like just really found me fascinating. And I didn't know this until, and one of the kids was in 8th grade and he was going to PVA for art, right? And so he was
That's
kind of nervous.
what's the name of that school?
I'm,
Houston.
I'm sorry, it's high school visual and performing arts.
That's right.
High school for high school for visual and performing arts. And so he was going to PVA the following year. He was kind of nervous, and eventually, like, they asked me if I could come over one afternoon for lunch, and he was there, and he was like, they kind of were like, he wants to ask you questions, but doesn't, and I like turned to him like, yeah, man, like whatever you want to ask me, like I'm definitely, and so he wanted me to. He really liked how I drew. Like I think I'm a terrible. It was like I'm so bad at drawing, but he really liked that, right? And he wanted to know what I knew about art. And so I was like, I told him like kind of my story. I was like, I didn't go to art school, so I can't tell you like the mechanics of drawing, but I can draw with you. And then like if you want to draw with me and then like kind of follow what I do, then like that's how like that I would and I told him like how I taught myself how to draw when I was really young was like look at comic books and just draw the comic book as best of my ability. And eventually, again, like you said, like you get better by repeating it, And so I would just draw the same comic book over and over and over again. And so what we had,
I love that
so what
story.
I kind of came up with was I got like a big roll of like butcher paper and I would just roll it out and we would just draw in his living room over the course of like the summer. And so like what he had was like this timeline of him making work. And so he got to see him progress over these like the summer, the month and 2 months or whatever they're out of school between, and so he got to see himself like progress in this way that like was good for his he felt a lot better going into PBA, right? For whatever reason, I don't know if him being able to see the progress and how much progress he made and like him being able to be so free and like the idea of him being able to be like that's also very important for artists to kind of recognize.
I think it's intimidating for anyone that goes to create.
Yeah. Right.
They have that stop moment.
Right.
And a lot of we self-reflect on what we are, and increasingly I realize that that's important to me. For people to look at my stuff and say, I could do that, and I'm like, absolutely, you could.
Yeah,
you could.
Yeah.
This is
Why
how
not?
you do it. I don't know how much you use social media. You mentioned Instagram.
Yes, I am. Yeah, social media is a double-edged sword. I
love it. It's free.
Yeah.
I mean, it's our time. It's marketing. All we have to do is document. The other part of that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's why I mean, like, I just have to like get off of Facebook before I get into arguments with people. So it's like
there's a hide function. Don't get off Facebook. I love seeing your artwork.
Yeah. Oh, I'm saying like I like post stuff and then I guess like I like can't scroll through other people's feeds because it's like sometimes it's like, oh my God,
Yes.
So
well, yeah.
Before the frustration sits in, I like to post my work and then get off. And I like to have conversations and stuff like that too. Like that's why I open up in the messenger is to people are like interested in the work and I like to be accessible.
Yep.
Like that. Like that's important for me.
Well, it's very important. And so it was a moment earlier tonight. I started playing with TikTok.
Okay. Nice.
Which have you?
I haven't played with it yet. I like the videos; they're funny.
Well, when I first opened it, I didn't get it, and then I'm like, "Well, what's there to get? You use things the way you use them." So I just started to be me on them, and I don't have like a big following, but what I've noticed is it's little kids
Yeah, it's young.
that
It's
are
really young
that are
people.
like they're following me. And you know, we were talking about the hesitation to create. So like earlier tonight, one of those kids, I put a time lapse up, and he said, I'm trying to quote, like how I love that. Like that's how I can. I'm like, man, you're really young.
Yeah, like is actually in the title. That's awesome. That's great.
like, like how do you make the outline to the drawing? And that was like a really cool special moment because I'm like, okay, he's probably interested in drawing. So I made a little
Yeah,
video. I'm like, well, this is how I did it, and then shot it back up. And
yeah,
it's cool that we have that type of exchange because,
yeah.
I, like, I talk in tangents, and I
Okay.
apologize, but
Yeah, I'm also an artist, so it's
like
okay.
circles and
Yeah,
eddies of, but yeah, you know, that's tied into that fear, and to me, I find the more I can broadcast personally, and it's something I encourage other artists to do. I love hearing your story, that butcher paper and
yeah,
the kid going to PVA. I think as artists, we should be doing more of that because we get this rad life, and other people should too. And the more that's realized, the stronger the economy of being an artist will prevail. So,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like, it's
so yeah, I'm psyched talking to you. I remember this energy, you know.
yeah. Through even through the internet.
Yeah,
But yeah, absolutely. I think that idea of, and like I guess like that was also what I kind of, unbeknownst to me, learning this with like whenever I was in my studio and I lived in my I like moved into a house with four friends, and the house, like it's like we have like enough space. I have my own studio and my room.
what
And
neighborhood are you in
huh?
Houston? What
Oh, in
where in
third
Houston
ward.
are you? Third
Third
ward. Okay,
ward.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. We're in third ward. And
You're
so
making me homesick, like with all these landmark
you
references.
have to
So
come visit. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and so unbeknownst to me, learning this, I was, again, living in my studio for 3 years, like really wanting to work every day. Like this idea of working every day was important to me. And so I had to redefine what was working, and made that more broader in the sense. Like, even though I wasn't working on an actual painting itself, like a sketch was working, writing an idea down was working, like doodling was working, taking a photo was working, like whatever, as long as I was like, um, exercising my imagination in that way, like pushing myself to create something, whatever it might be, then that's whenever like art became easier to make, right? Whenever
yeah,
it's less specific, it's like, so I gotta have the right piece of canvas, and I gotta be in the right type of mood, and et cetera, et cetera. And so I think all artists and all people can like learn to let go of that.
yeah,
The first step of let going of it is like recognizing whenever you're doing it. Because if you're aware that you're doing it, you can like stop, take a break, and then go back, like, all right, I'm gonna create. It's like, and like doodling is not a big deal. Or, it's like, or like drawing on a piece of, it's like what would happen with me and the kid would be that like I would just start to draw because I was in this state of mind of like, there's a blank piece of paper in front of me, like I'm gonna put something on it, if I'm allowed to, right?
right.
And so I think that encouraged him to also act like that, right? Like the idea of quote unquote turning it on, as you say, it's like a light switch.
Yeah,
And so once you understand that you have control of this light switch, and there's no song that, like you get inspired by songs and that's awesome, but like that song doesn't control you creating. You
right.
control whenever you want to create. And so if you broaden your idea of what it means to create, then you have more of a level playing field, right? But if it's like creating to me is just like I can only paint, that's creating. But it's like, well, I mean that is creating for sure. But like if you don't sketch, then you can't create a new painting. And so if you have all these like loose sketches around, then you have all these ideas to create more paintings. But until you like broaden the field of what it means to create, then of course it's going to be hard to create. Or what you this like perfect idea or ideal situation was to create.
Well, the main thing I found, because yeah, I get old. I think it's part of aging. You start to feel like you're lecturing.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like you have to remember that this is fun.
Yeah.
Breaking
Right.
out
It's supposed to be fun.
pencils or gluing stuff together, stapling something onto something else. That's fun, and you can never forget that. And I think that you forget that the easiest when you sit there and agonize over something maybe you haven't even started to create.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
I think it's become like it just makes me sad when I hear somebody say, "I can't even draw a straight line."
Right.
And it's just casual conversation, but it's casual conversation that has been soaked into. I will limit it to American culture, that you're supposed to kind of be proud of that, or it's a quippy statement that's cool, but I'm like, it's uncool because your kids are listening, and they may agonize because they can't draw a straight line, they can't be an artist. That's the kind of influence you're having. It's like telling your kid that you were bad at math too. I'm like, don't tell them that.
Yeah.
Encourage them to be good at math.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Maybe you are, but that's on you.
You're right, exactly.
Don't, when we talk about legacy, don't give that legacy. Have you seen there's an art documentary, The Woodmans?
No.
Man, it's a family of artists, and I remember it reminded me of something you were saying. They talked about kind of artist block, and he's like, go into your studio and sharpen pencils.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because eventually you'll start to draw, or you'll get an idea. And as long as you are putting yourself in the environment, there is no block.
Yeah,
that's all in your head.
Yeah.
So,
I recently my cousin is 22, and she goes to UT, and she takes a class there about rejection. Like, it's a course on rejection.
I love that.
She called me, and she's like, dude, will you please give a lecture to my class about rejection? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I would absolutely love to give a talk. And so, the talk is just about, like, they pretty much just want to talk about me as an artist and, like, times in my career whenever I faced rejection and how I handle that type of rejection and et cetera, et cetera. And so at the end of the lecture, it's open to questions, and one of the students asked me, how do I handle artist blocks, and so I tell her kind of how I told you about redefining what it means to create.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you're gonna have an artist block if you step to a painting and, like, this is what I need to be doing. Like, if you kind of force yourself to do a medium or a type of thing, you're not really into, like, you don't have to paint all the time. That's all right. Like, you can go out and take a photo or make a collage or do a doodle or whatever. And so you broaden your sense of what it means to create. And, like, if you make it too specific, then of course, like, that's what you're gonna think it's gonna happen. But if you broaden what it means to create, then an artist block is irrelevant. Like, it doesn't really exist because you are able to always create something, like, it's, and that, again, that create, even if you don't like doing collages, maybe that collage maybe gives you an idea to make a painting or whatever. Then of course, then that idea of what you think of an artist block is only painting is gone. So it's, it's about how you kind of define what that is, and you can redefine it to whatever it is you want. It's your career, it's your, it's up to you to redefine it, because people define those things like what it means for them. But you, as an artist, you can redefine it however you want. But you have the nerve that you can too.
We are in control. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's why we became artists. So.
Correct. Yeah, and so I guess I can't even draw a straight line. You can, because you're in control, like you can, but you have to let go of that. Like
But you
if
need a
you
ruler.
let go of that negative thought, then you won't be thinking about that straight line. Like you won't be thinking about how hard it is to draw a straight line when drawing a straight line. You'll just draw the straight line.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so-
that I remember, like you, I would I don't get to go to museums. Like parenthood is it's another chapter, John.
Yeah.
Be careful, okay? I had heard of it. I
Yeah,
remember seeing John Alexander. Do you know his work?
yeah, I do.
So he talked, and there was this period of time where there was a marked difference in his work. And he said, well, you know, I had kids and I was going to soccer practice. But it made this cool body of work. So it's just a different animal.
Yeah, for sure.
But I lost track of what I was going to say. But what I'm going to say is I hope you'll come back because, man, I think I hope you're enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I this is just like we picked up, you know, a decade ago back at
Yeah,
gallery. And,
yeah, let's do a part 2 or something. I'm down.
and I don't know, maybe we can collaborate on some stuff. Where can people find you?
My Instagram, which is just my name, Jonathan Paul Jackson. Yeah, JONATHAN, Paul PAUL Jackson.
Okay.
Yeah, you can definitely find me on Instagram. I'm very accessible.
Yeah.
I pretty much answer
Awesome.
every message like within an hour.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. And the gallery again that you're representing?
It's Foltz Fine Art, FOLTZ. It's located on 2143 Westheimer Road in Houston, Texas.
Okay. Hey, Matt, congratulations on all of your success.
Oh, thank you so much.
I
man.
want to see it keep going and going and going, and
Yeah,
I'm happy
absolutely.
to
Thanks for following.
connecting with you again, and thank you.
Yeah, man, for sure.
I'll see you next time.
Later, man.
Bebop.
Artist Bebop, the #1 podcast for artists, expression, and creativity. Can you feel it? Yeah. It's all about the art, the hustle, the passion. It's all about the art, the hustle, the passion. It's all about the art, the hustle, the passion. It's all about the art, the hustle, the passion. Yeah. We're on a roll with the visceral expression of life. Artist Bebop, yeah, we're doing it right. A place where like minds can be set free. Sip some tea, yeah, focus your key. This is the zone where creativity flows. Follow the road, see where it goes. Open your mind, be inspired in time. And love the moment cause it's so divine. It's all about the